Hello, welcome or welcome back to Sapling Tarot. My name is Imogen and I am a professional tarot reader. I've been reading tarot for more than half my life, but I've been reading professionally for about 4 years. In that time, I have been really lucky to read for hundreds of people, probably more than hundreds at this point, which is very cool, or an honour. But I've also been really lucky to meet a lot of fellow tarot readers, not in the least through my kind of podcasty interviewee series talking to fellow neurodivergent tarot readers. And something that comes up an awful lot, particularly in those interviews, is about learning the tarot and about how I think a lot of people come into it thinking you have to learn it like 78 flashcards. And I don't know anyone whose memory would work like that, but certainly not mine. So I thought I would talk to you about how I learned fucking years ago, and any kind of tips and tricks that I've picked up along the way, giving you some options, maybe busting some myths along with this kind of 78 flashcard nonsense thing, and let you know some things that I've picked up from other people. I hope you will join me in this kind of story time plus. So, like I said, I've been reading tarot for over 15 years, and I was introduced to it by my next door neighbour when I was a kid, a teenager, and she was a sociologist and a psychologist, and she was this like incredibly intellectual and academic woman, and because I learned about it through her, I was able to kind of knock down some prejudices that I had about tarot just like immediately. And it feels bad now to say that I had those beliefs, or that that's what it took. That it took someone, you know, a white older woman with this incredible academic background to be the person that made me see that there was something real to tarot. But that's how it happened. You know, I would be lying if I said anything else. And I was hooked. She read for me. She read for my mum, who is not into that kind of stuff particularly, although more and more every year. I'm having an effect. And yeah, it opened my eyes to this being a way of seeing the world. I mean, she did like a past life reading. We went straight in with like the heavy kind of woo part of it, but I was straight on board like immediately. The deck she used was the first deck that I had, because I was like, well, that'll be the deck. That'll be the deck for me. And it is this 90s baby. It is the Osho Zen Tarot. Now, I will give the caveat that I do not sign off on the individual or the organisation of Osho and everything that represents. However, I cannot deny that this was my first and only deck for at least the first 10 years of my practice. So it would be disingenuous of me to say, oh no, I started learning with blah. But then also, if you think about any of the tarot decks that we work with, the main one, the most recognisable one, do I have a copy to hand? I do. Oh, look at me being professional. So this is the Moon Baby Tarot, which is based on an iconic 1970s deck called the Hoi Polloi Tarot, but the illustrations are inspired by the 1901 tarot deck, which is commonly called the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot, because Rider is the publisher, Waite was the bloke who wrote the book, Smith was the Pamela Coleman Smith, or Pixie, was the woman who illustrated them. And so these are the most like recognisable images of the tarot, I think, globally. Probably, let me find you a really classic one that you will have seen on, like, you know, TV and film and stuff. But also let's try and find one without nudity. Okay, so we've got the Fool, you've got, you know, this kind of androgynous figure by a cliff with that little dog. You know, it's things like death and the lovers. There are all of these like big cards that you see in TV and film and stuff. Of course, none of the ones that, yeah, there we go. So like that's one that they use a fair amount. So these illustrations came out of an organisation that probably no more or less problematic than, or certainly no less, could well be more, I don't know, I'm no historian, problematic than the person who created the deck that I'm talking about. Anyway, that was a massive tangent and I'm really, really sorry. I will, fingers crossed, remember to put timestamps on this if I can. Anyway, so this is the deck that I've had for ages. It is, I think it's as old as I am. I haven't had it the whole time. You 100% can buy your first tarot deck. I really, really thought that this had been debunked. Annoyingly, I was given this by somebody else, but I wholeheartedly 100% believe that you can buy your own tarot deck. Well, your own first tarot deck. I definitely believe you can buy your own tarot deck generally, because I have an extensive collection of which I have bought almost all of them myself. But certainly your first tarot deck, why wouldn't you be able to buy your own first tarot deck? I think that is particularly important because when it comes to what deck should you buy first, what should your first tarot deck be, what's the best beginner deck, my only piece of advice, and I will get into some more details in a second, my only piece of advice would be the one that you want to work with, the one that you want to pick up and have in your hands, that it's, you know, a pleasant tactile experience for you, that, you know, it has imagery that you find inviting and inspiring and evocative, and yeah, the kind of thing that you want to get out and mess around with. Like that's how I think that has to be the primary driving force behind you buying your first tarot deck. It has to be something that you want to work with, not something that you're afraid of or something that you're intimidated by. And I've been intimidated by decks that I've bought, but I think particularly when you're starting, something that you feel excited by is the primary thing. I suppose I would counsel that you need to decide, I suppose, between, there are three main types of tarot deck, but two of those you can kind of slightly lump together. I'm not being very clear, I'm really sorry. Essentially what you need to decide is, do you want all of the cards in your deck to have pictures on them, or to have scenes on them? They will all have pictures because that's what they are, Imogen. But so for instance, this deck is the lovely Gay Marseille by Charlie Claire Burgess, and a Marseille deck, like a lot of traditional French and Italian decks out of the, can I remember? Do I have it in my notes? No, that would be sensible. You know, the original tarot decks or whatever, they don't all have scenes on them. Some of them are just sticks or coins or swords or something, and they don't give you like a ton to work with. And so what you're working with is numerology, maybe some kind of elemental associations and stuff like that, but it's not on the card in the same way that a fully illustrated deck that is maybe more of that Rider-Waite-Smith tradition will have, this isn't just like 9 coins on it, you've got a lady in a garden with a fancy hat and a bird and stuff to work with. And so that's your choice, essentially, is how much detail do you want, because the full scene might be overwhelming, the numerology might feel like that's a bit hard to remember. It's up to you. My first deck was, like I say, this deck from the 90s, because it was the deck that I was first read for, with which I was first read English. Yeah, this is, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it now, but it was the deck that like grabbed me by the lapels and was just like, I'm for you. I am the deck that you can work with. These images were, evocative enough to me, inspiring enough that I could understand them. I just pulled the understanding card. But yeah, be warned, if you are interested in this deck, there is some kind of problematic keywords and imagery. And speaking of which, this keywords is an interesting way to learn tarot. You could 100% have a deck like this that has keywords instead of like the names of them. Yeah, things like keywords can be helpful, but then they can be limiting. So this deck, the suits are colour coded rather than like telling you what they are. So this is a cups or a water suit, this is a wands or a fire suit. I think they're renamed as well, which doesn't help. It was a wild first deck to use. It doesn't really translate to anything. It's like loosely based on the like Smith-Waite and kind of Thoth historical Golden Dawn tradition. I'm really sorry if that is not, if that's just like adding more jargon into it. The first reading I ever had, going back to that, was using what is called a Celtic cross spread, which is where you have two cards crossed over, and then you have a past and a future position, then you have a conscious and an unconscious position, and then you have 4 cards down the side, and that varies. People argue about what those cards mean exactly. I work with it in terms of being your relationship to yourself in the situation, your relationship to other people in the situation, your desires and denials, and then like a possible like advice outcome card. I've worked with that spread. That's like the only spread I used for maybe like 10 years or something. It's like a 10 card spread. It's a big boy, it's a lot of cards, it's a lot of stuff to be taking in. I'm not such a fan of the single card reading. I really hope you can't hear my neighbour doing power tools on a Monday afternoon. I like the context, I like the storytelling of having multiple cards. I don't know, and I'm sure there are people that would say this makes me not a very good tarot reader. I feel like just pulling one card would never really be enough for me. But that is because I'm a chatty bitch, and I like when the cards talk to each other and I like when they talk to me. And I feel like each card has so many possible interpretations that you need a little bit of context to help you pick out the exact right interpretation for that moment. For how many years? So many years. Like the first 5, 6 years of my tarot practice, I used solely the Celtic cross spread, and I pulled for the guidebook all the time. I think people have a lot of shame about using the guidebook because that feels like you're not a proper reader. And while I would say, if you are putting yourself in a position where you are reading professionally, where you are taking money for readings, it's probably not ideal that you be reaching for a guidebook just because of maybe how that looks. In your own personal practice, do whatever the fuck you want. I cannot stress this enough. I think there's like a curve of when you're starting out, you need the guidebook because you don't know what the cards mean. And then it's like training wheels, like you want to get rid of it and you want to go without the book and you want to just be purely doing it on your own knowledge and your own intuition and all that stuff. And that's fab and that's great. But also a lot of people I know return to the guidebook, particularly if you have a number of decks, because it is interesting to gather other people's perspectives. There are so many ways that you can read each card, and for every guidebook you have, the good ones, you get another piece of that puzzle, and you get to add and layer, and you get to consider other people's perspectives and go, oh, I like that, I'm gonna take that, I'm gonna use that, or fuck off, that's wrong. And that's fine, like, but you get to enjoy that, you get to work with that. And also things like tarot books, which I do want to talk about. I think I was going to talk about courses first, but like I said, I've written too many notes, it's getting overwhelming for me, so I'm just stream of consciousness talking at you. I think a lot of people probably feel like once you know tarot, you know tarot. And potentially for some people that is the case. I feel like I will always be learning because I love hearing how other people read tarot. I like getting readings from other readers. And I love reading books about tarot and other people's interpretations of tarot. For instance, Red Tarot by Christopher Marmolejo is a book that is such a treat to pull out when I've, pulled some cards and to just go and read. You get like 2 or 3 pages per card of this incredible writing that ties it into, so the particular vantage point of that book is like the decolonial way of looking at tarot. And it pulls in all of these incredible thinkers and educators and philosophers and activists, and it ties up. I mean, just like, if I felt like I just knew everything because I know what all 78 cards mean, then I would miss out on that, And so I suppose there's an element of humbling yourself to the collective, and that we as individuals, it is a joy and a privilege to be in community. Oh, I sound very preachy. To be in community with other people whose brains work differently and to see the world differently, and how cool it is to be able to like collect those perspectives. But that's just, my thought. Maybe you think that guidebooks and tarot books or whatever are just training wheels, and you should be able to cast them aside as soon as you've learned your 78 cards. I also have done some tarot courses in my life, and while I would be really hesitant to recommend you do any tarot course, because we don't have a governing body, there is no, I was about to say there is no right or wrong way to read tarot. I feel like that is a contentious statement. There are no hard and fast rules with tarot, I suppose is maybe what I would say. So it's kind of a thing of like, who is anyone to teach anyone? And then here I am on the internet telling you how to learn tarot. Well, I'm telling you how I learned tarot, and like, you might get something out of it, is basically why I'm here. But I did a tarot diploma. I'm officially qualified in tarot, and that means literally nothing. The only course that I've done, or the kind of courses that I would recommend if you are the kind of person that gets something out of doing courses, like kind of more regimented study, are people who are teaching you either how they do it, and they're very specific that it's about how they read tarot. Fucking A, amazing. Anyone that teaches you that it is the only way or the best way to read tarot, I would immediately be a little bit skeptical, because how can anyone know that? No one can know that. But the course that I've done that I would really recommend is the Alternative Tarot course by Little Red Tarot here in the UK. It's a pay what you can thing. I think it's self-paced, and it is about looking at tarot beyond kind of received traditional wisdom, which I think is great. It's about kind of learning to zig when traditional tarot teachings would tell you to zag. I can't even remember which I said. Learning to zig when they tell you to zag, or zag when they tell you to zig, whatever. And I think that kind of thing just shakes up. So if you've learned that you pull the Empress, that definitely means that someone's pregnant, or that the court cards are all really specific people that you will meet, and that means that you will definitely meet a man with dark hair and blue eyes that is like this, and the kind of the gendering of it all, and that, you know, women are inherently, or like queens are all about nurturing and intuition and stuff because women, and the sort of slightly wonky, outdated logic that holds. And so yeah, I would recommend any course where it's about sort of disrupting, or books. So, you know, I'm again looking at my bookshelf and I've got Queering the Tarot and Radical Tarot and Tarot for Change and Tarot on Earth and 78 Acts of Liberation and The Fool's Journey and all of these fantastic books by fantastic people, and it's all about kind of cracking apart that rigidity. So yeah, those are the kind of courses that I would recommend. Hiya, editing Imogen, jumping in here. I'm finally editing this goddamn video to say I got quite caught up on the idea of courses. Workshops I would recommend that I've done are the ones that Kellyanne Maddox does periodically, that like pick a particular type of tarot reading and talk you through that kind of thing. For instance, I did her Love on the Cards workshop last year, maybe, and that was great. I'm also tempted to do Dr. Kate Thomas's workshop for exactly the reasons I've just mentioned, about the kind of cracking things open, knowing the rules in order to break them, decolonial, anti-patriarchal, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I haven't done that one, so I can't like say what I think of it, but I'm really tempted by it. So yeah, that kind of workshop. In terms of like self-study, a lot of received wisdom is to do the single card pull daily. I cannot do that, and I don't think I'm having like limiting self-beliefs by saying that I can't do that. I also kind of don't want to do that. I'm not very good at any daily anything that isn't about my like basic survival. So, you know, eating and sleeping and drinking enough water and taking my tablets and all of that kind of stuff. Beyond that, anything that I have to do every day, we're going to have a bit of a fight about it. It's just the way I am. And I think that is the case for quite a lot of people who are neurodivergent, and a whole bunch of other people as well. Like, I think it's just a challenging, you know, to do anything every day for 78 days or whatever, and then also expect yourself to remember them somehow. I'm not really sure. I think my best advice for learning things will always be about making connections. And I think that's backed up with educational psychology, but I'm no educational psychologist, but about linking things to stuff you already know. So if you already know about astrology, tarot's going to be a breeze, hopefully, because you can, I mean, each of the cards you can associate with planets or, you know, celestial bodies in particular places, and then if that makes sense to you, if that's the way your brain works, or that is existing knowledge that you have, that will all make sense. if you enjoy numbers and kind of numerology, and you can see the difference between, say, like odd numbers being more kind of like active and even numbers being more kind of like balanced and passive. If you can see things in sort of like an elemental framework of associating some things with fire and some things with water, some things with air, some things with earth, I think those are the sorts of things that help you link things together, finding the commonalities between cards. So like looking at all of the sixes together, which includes the sixes from the major arcana. And I didn't do a very good beginner's mind job of this video because I don't know how much you know. The major arcana being like those big archetypal cards that sit sort of like over the top of the tarot, things like death, the lovers, that whole fool's journey that goes through all of these big recognisable themes. And then you've got the kind of, you know, normal deck of playing cards-ish underneath, each with a different suit, which each has its own elemental association and area of your life that it's talking about, your inner world that it's talking about. And I think learning to make those connections, figuring out your own keywords. I know that Lisa Pepez, wonderful Tarot Tube human, has a book about figuring out your own keywords. That's not something that I've done, but I feel like that would be a really great place to, if you were starting from the ground up, figuring out what does 7 mean to you? And like, that's a really deep philosophical question, I'm real sorry. But tarot will kind of start to scratch at stuff like that. I learned tarot with a guidebook. I then went on and I did a course and I learned kind of to fill in the gaps with the Rider-Waite-Smith meanings. I learned to look at the cards, particularly if you're working with scenic cards, and like, what do those things mean to you? I think is the big question, and is where you end up with there being a reason for there being more than one tarot reader in the world, or more than one tarot book in the world, is that it's about perspective, and your life experience will dictate how you read tarot. Your beliefs and your values will dictate how you read tarot. And I think some people would say that that's wrong, and that you should be totally kind of sterile and unbiased and neutral on everything. But I think that is unlikely. You know, therapists, counsellors, etc., you know, the idea is that you leave all of your prejudices and your biases at the door, and you know, you work through them in supervision or whatever, you know, to make sure that you're not inflicting that on other people. But the point is the awareness, you know, that you have an awareness of your biases and, you know, the things that you have connections with. Because I think it's human, if we're showing up in our full humanity, then we will be showing up with bias, with prejudice, with things that colour and cloud and skew our vision and perspective. But that doesn't mean that they're not valuable. Like the quest for true kind of neutrality, and for everything to be very kind of like unemotional and very kind of like rational and logical, I think is kind of a little bit where humanity goes to die. Is that contentious? Maybe. And like, I'm very pro science, I'm very pro logic and rationality, but I just don't think that it should be put up on a pedestal above lived experience and having like human connections and human relationships with one another. And so I think particularly as a professional reader, what I'm doing, you know, whether I'm reading tarot correctly, is I would say like the third or fourth thing I'm thinking about if I'm sitting across from you and I'm listening about, you know, your story. The first thing is that I want you to feel seen, heard. Then I want you to feel understood, appreciated, valued. Then I want the cards to give you something, whatever that is that you need, whether it's a kick up the arse, whether it's, gentle encouragement, whether it's just a space to be, kind of honesty, that kind of thing. And then accuracy in terms of, I've done some readings where I think if it had been recorded and someone had like written down what I'd said, say the Seven of Pentacles was about, and then gave it to me on a piece of paper and said, do you stand by this? Do you stand by the Seven of Pentacles meaning XYZ? I'd probably be like, no. It wouldn't be in like my top 10 ways to describe the Seven of Pentacles, but I think what matters in that moment is about the context. It's about the storytelling, it's about the nuance and the layers and the context of being within the question, but also the person's life and my life in these moments where that Venn diagram overlaps and we're having this shared moment. I think that is the thing that's most important. And I think if you're reading for yourself, then again, it's about that awareness, and the awareness of not just kind of telling yourself what you want to hear or telling, somebody else what they want to hear, but thinking about what is needed in that moment. And sometimes that is just space, and to feel seen, heard, understood, appreciated, just feeling like you've got room to breathe. And sometimes that's enough. And I think that giving yourself room to explore your first thought, which is often where those biases and those prejudices and maybe the things you want to see, the things that you need in that very kind of like superficial way, but then letting it settle and going deeper and going, okay, but actually, what is this? What does this need? And I don't know how much accuracy flashcard accuracy of this card means this thing is what is necessary most of the time. And I don't know how helpful that is if what you're trying to do is learn the tarot. But I think my point is like, trust yourself, trust your intuition. The tarot has a system. And so I'm not someone that's going to say your intuition is all you need. I think it is a little bit of a case of learning the rules in order to know how to break them. I think if you're not reading within the tarot system, and you're not reading tarot, my neighbours. But that is also fine. Like, oracle decks exist. You can go pure intuitive. You can do cartomancy with playing cards. You can do Kipper and Lenormand, and there are so many different systems. But I think like giving yourself a bit of time, trying not to rush yourself to learn it, and then just making connections with your life and with anything else that makes sense to you, finding the patterns, looking in your life and going like, okay, when do I feel like the Six of Cups? When do I feel like those, little kids making like flower crowns and stuff? What does that feel like? Or do I feel like the guy in the background, like walking away? What kind of like nostalgia and childlike wonder and reflection, like when do I feel that? And then try and kind of stick that to the card. This has been awfully waffly, and it's going to be really interesting to edit and see if this is even remotely salvageable into some kind of coherent train of thought. Hey, I didn't tell you I'd teach you how to learn the tarot. I said I'd tell you how I learned tarot and hope that you got something from it. Trial and error, practice, boring but the truth, and trying to find things to connect it to in your own life. And talking to other tarot nerds. It's amazing. There are so many cool people that read tarot, that write about tarot, that have so many interesting perspectives on tarot. And we're never going to have learned it all, and I think that's delicious. That's like, my autistic dream is having a special interest that is absolutely bottomless, and tarot has really done that for me, and I hope it can do that for you too. Thank you for listening, if this video ever sees the light of day. I hope you're taking really good care of yourself. If this video hasn't made you think that I am just insufferable, to find more from me, my links are in the description box. You can follow me on Instagram, on Blue Sky. Okay, my memory's really full, so it's telling me to shut the fuck up. I hope you're taking really good care of yourself, and thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one. Take care. Bye. I am going to have to edit this video because this is going to be like pulling teeth for anyone watching it, and for that I apologise. I wrote shit tons of notes, and it is doing me absolutely no good.